Dr. Yoshi may be the provider that has done the most of this procedure in this country. What is EBOO exactly?
Yeah, so EBOO stands for Extracorporeal Blood Oxygenation and Ozonation. So a lot of people think of it as like a dialysis, and that's really just because we have blood coming out of one arm, going through this machine, and then coming back into the other arm. It's not dialysis at all. It's we get this huge surface area of our blood exposed to the oxygen ozone mixture.
Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the Dr. Joy Kong podcast. And I'm excited to bring you the best doctors, scientists, thought leaders on this podcast to really illuminate on your knowledge, your understanding of health and wellness. And I just want everybody to live a better life. So today I have the pleasure of interviewing Dr. Yoshi Rahm. And Dr. Rahm, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me. Looking forward to it.
Okay. I think you tend to be called Dr. Yoshi, right?
Let's go with Dr. Yoshi, yeah.
That's kind of how patients call you, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So Dr. Yoshi is actually here based in Southern California in LA County. And he, very interestingly, grew up in a small town in Northern California and had a very simple upbringing without electricity, TV, or phone. And so that gave him an early appreciation for healthy living. But he did have family members that were ill, and that became a driving force for Dr. Yoshi to pursue healing in the form of becoming a family physician. And during his residency at Glendale Adventist Medical Center, he received the highest distinction, the Resident of the Year award, and also the one presented by both faculty and the staff. And he went on to become an attending physician and then established his own practice, Oasis Family Medicine in Glendale. And he has been a pioneer in holistic healing approaches. And one thing he's very passionate about, and we're going to focus on a lot today, is what's called EBOO. This particular therapy has gained tremendous popularity. People are beginning to understand the power of this treatment that combines ozone therapy and light therapy. And I'm going to have Dr. Yoshi to go into details. But Dr. Yoshi has done probably close to 2,000 of these procedures on patients, and maybe the provider that has done the most of this procedure in this country. So he's very qualified to speak about this particular treatment and also some other treatments that he's excited about. So Dr. Yoshi, I can't wait for you to educate everybody on what you do.
Yeah, happy to share the knowledge and share the wealth. So
so before we dive into EBOO, I'm so curious, how did you grow up with no electricity in America?
Yeah, right.
China. It's like, did that happen in America?
Right. Hippie parents is what it boils down to. Grew up like small town, an hour outside of a small town in Northern California. No electricity, no running water, literally no nothing. Lived the first few weeks of my life in a teepee. And so I think I lived that way until I was 11 when we moved into town. And
were you running around with no shoes?
Absolutely. Like grounded, sunlight, fresh water, clean food, gardens, right? The whole spiel. And I think that just gave me a strong foundation.
Wow. And who in your family was not well? That kind of
Yeah, my younger brother, who was 3 years younger than me, he actually had spinal meningitis when he was a baby. And so as a result, he had some of his brain removed and ended up having seizures for the rest of his life, which he passed away when he was 25 from one of those seizures. But just growing up as his older brother and kind of helping to take care of him definitely spurred my interest in especially brain health, neurological health. Kind of fast forward, my dad actually passed away from ALS. He passed away in 2015. I became a doctor or started my practice in 2011. So that kind of was a big impetus to pushing me into integrative functional medicine. And we were able to help him for sure. enjoy those last few years of his life. Definitely slowed down the progression. Obviously, we didn't stop it. I kind of wonder if I had today's tools, if we would have been able to halt it potentially, maybe reverse, who knows? But it's been a good long learning journey for sure.
Wow.
Yeah.
But you went into medicine, so you are a doctor of osteopaths, right? So what I understand is the way osteopath education goes is that you learn everything that MD learns, and then you also do some adjustments. Is
Yeah.
that
Yeah,
fair?
that's a pretty good way of doing it. Yeah, it's basically the MD education and then an additional 200 hours in the musculoskeletal system. So
Right.
a lot of DOs will have that ability to do some either like cranial sacral therapy or adjustments like a
Mhm.
common chiropractor would be able to do. But it just comes down to, in general, the average DO probably has a little bit better understanding of the musculoskeletal and neurological
Mhm.
system to begin with.
Yeah, so I think both MDs and DOs were pretty much locked into the traditional medical approach of diagnosing and prescribing drugs. So
Yes.
how did you jump out of that model?
Yeah, I kind of just grown up hippie. I was always exposed to a little bit more holistic alternative medicine ideals. So I kind of went through medical school, kind of assuming I might go that route, and then explored a couple of conferences my last year of residency, and I was like, okay, I'm going to put out my own shingle and go into this. And then my dad got diagnosed with ALS, like literally right when my practice started. And so that was just like my first, okay, I got to go beyond what I was taught in medical school and
Right,
residency, right?
because they're
Because
not giving you much.
there's nothing
Exactly.
for ALS on that front, like zero,
Right, just watch the
right?
decline. That's pretty
Watch the
much the
decline, put
approach.
you on a
Yeah.
ventilator, that type of thing, right? But it doesn't actually get to why the ALS is started in the first place, which is kind of the premise of functional medicine, integrative, holistic medicine, depending how you want to call it. And so, yeah, that was just a great way to, and that's the part that I'm thankful for his diagnosis, is it like sped up my learning curve a lot more than it probably would have. And like
And
I
in what
mentioned,
ways do you think you actually were able to slow down his progression and help him?
yeah, so I started, I would say the biggest things, I mean, so I'm not going to mention all the nutraceuticals I had him on, but I had him on a ton, right? But then
Mhm.
I would say a couple of the game changers were IV glutathione and IV phosphatidylcholine,
Hmm.
because he still lived in Northern California, and so he would come down to Southern California for large chunks of time, months on end, and then kind of go back there for a few months, go back up north for a few months. And we could see when he would come back, when he would come stay with us and go into my office like almost every day or at least 3 times a week, for these IVs, his progression, his rate of decline it would just like halt. There would be
Mm.
no progression. And then he would go back up north and kind of do his own thing, not have access to the IVs. He would still be
Mhm.
taking the nutraceuticals orally, right? But he didn't have access to the IVs up there. And he would absolutely go like that. And he did that. I mean, he was given 12 to 18 months to live. And I think we got him like 5 years, four and a
Wow.
half years.
Mhm.
So by all standard, like he should have passed away. So we were definitely able to extend his life, and that was a good thing for him. That's probably not always a good thing for people, but he had such a great attitude about
Mm.
it that it was really awesome to be able to do that. And he was like, "I'm your guinea pig. What do you got for me?" Right? So it's
Right, I'm
just
going to
like,
make you a better doctor.
yeah, exactly. And then I'm able to turn around and like give that to all of our patients, right? And so that's the gift. That's like his gift kind of passed
Mhm.
on, part of his gift passed on through me to the rest of
Oh,
patients in the world.
wow. Well, we have to thank your dad.
Yeah, big time.
So, how did you get into EBOO? Did it start with ozone therapy?
Yeah, so I've been working with ozone first just in the form of prolozone, so injections into joints and
Okay.
soft tissues, since 2012, which that was part of my dad's regimen as well.
Mm.
But I we let me back up just a second. So my mother-in-law actually got diagnosed with idiopathic pulmonary fibrosis, which is a slow scarring of the lung tissue, for those of you who are not aware, basically until you get a lung transplant or die.
Yeah.
There's two medications that now that can slow the progression, but typically people from diagnosis until they either get the lung transplant or pass away is about somewhere between 3 and 7 years on average.
Mm-hmm.
My mother-in-law was one of 13. She actually had one brother pass away within like 2 years of his diagnosis, and then another sister who also had IPF, and she passed away within 2 or 3 years of her diagnosis. And then her mother also passed away of IPF. So very strong kind of predisposition to it. And so she got diagnosed, it's probably been 6.5 years ago now. And that was another like aha moment, right? Like the moment we got this diagnosis, she went from hiking to the top of Mount Kilimanjaro, and then 6 months later could like barely walk, keeping up with her walking buddies. Got the diagnosis, and then it was like another aha. Okay, what's the universe doing here, right? So again, opened up the toolbox and just was like, what can I offer? And interestingly, stem cells were one of those things that I did on her, and did IV stem cells, and that just totally halted the progression, like 100%. She actually ended up getting a couple percentages better, not all better, but totally halted the progression.
Beautiful.
Now she's on the medication as well, but it's absolutely the stem cells. We have like CT scans to prove it. The unfortunate part is that her pulmonologists at Cedars-Sinai don't care what else she's doing, right? So it's like 6 years later, after she's had 3 family members die within 2 to 3 years of diagnosis, she's still doing totally status quo, right? After going down like this for the first 6 to 8 months, right? So it's just a sad critique of standard medicine that they won't open their mind. A lot of them won't open their minds, right? They want to do good, but they
getting
won't.
better, and they're not interested in finding out how.
Why not ask questions? How?
Right. That's really sad.
So fast forward. So that was kind of a long-winded explanation. Fast forward to the beginning of the pandemic and that first month of it starting, when I think I didn't quite have a good grasp of what was really going on. I was like, okay, I got to get more tools in my toolbox for my mother-in-law. So, and I'd kind of heard about this ozone dialysis. I searched around. Nobody could like train me on it though, and show me how to do. So I ended up building my own machine. I thought it would take me like a month. It ended up taking me about 6 months, because it was like my first real mad scientist experience. My blood was on the walls, like all over. We ordered so many sets of tubings, and because there's a lot that goes into the engineering of an EBOO machine. Finally, again,
so can you first tell the listeners what is EBOO exactly?
Yeah, great question. So EBOO stands for Extracorporeal Blood Oxygenation and Ozonation. So a lot of people think of it as like a dialysis, and that's really just because we have blood coming out of one arm, going through this machine, and then coming back into the other arm, ideally. But it's not dialysis at all. It's really just, how do we get this huge surface area of our blood exposed to the oxygen ozone mixture? And when we say we're giving ozone to someone, it's actually usually only somewhere between 1% and 3% ozone. The other 97 to 99% is actually oxygen. So it's actually oxygen ozone mixture. And so in EBOO, extracorporeal, so outside of the body, blood oxygenation and ozonation. So there's this filter that, depending on what filter we're talking about, it's about 1.5 to 3 square meters of filter paper. And our blood is literally running across 1.5 to 3 square meters of filter paper that has a bunch of little micro holes in it where oxygen ozone is on one side and it's permeating through those little holes into our blood. And so it's just this like continuous, we do it for about 45 to 60 minutes typically in someone. And so it's just this continuous low dose of oxygen and ozone being introduced into the blood of a person.
Is there any extra benefit of using the filter? I know the traditional, ozone therapy, the oxygen and ozone mixtures mix directly with the blood. Is there a benefit to using a filter?
Yeah, really the main benefit is just this huge surface area. So where an EBOO session probably gives, depending on the exact settings and what other ozone therapy you're talking about, it gives, it's probably the equivalent of like 10 to 20 MAHs or major autohematherapy, where a little bit of blood is drawn out, put into a bag, and then some ozone is injected into that bag and then dripped back into the person. Phenomenal therapy, which I'd love to like mention that we're doing an MAH study that people are welcome to join if they're in Southern California. But again, it's like the EBOO is about 10 to 20 sessions worth of oxygen and ozone, right? And so it just tends to be a lot better. It's probably about 2 to 3 times more than a 10 pass for those of you who are maybe familiar with a 10 pass.
2 to 3 times more. That's a lot more.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And it's given more gently than a 10 pass. So 10 pass is a phenomenal therapy. I have nothing bad to say about 10 pass. It truly is a phenomenal therapy, but it gives the ozone at a much higher concentration. So it's harsher on the red blood cells, which some people can just have like a Herxheimer's reaction to. And so it can become it's kind of like a little too much of a good thing oftentimes, which can happen with any therapy, right? But it's like, where's that balancing act? And so that's part of the beauty of EBOO, is that people tend to tolerate it really, really well.
Okay. But you're actually connecting a person twice, right? One is a needle that takes the blood out. The other one's a needle that put the blood in. So do you think that is there an issue for some people not being able to establish this kind of flow? Is that an issue at all?
It can be, but that has more to do with the experience of the nurse than anything. I mean, for someone who really who has horrible veins, this is probably not a good therapy to pursue, because you do need kind of moderate to larger gauge needles. But again, that usually has more to do with how good the nurse is. And sometimes it's an issue, but we've done somewhere between 1,500 and 2,000 sessions of EBOO at this point, and we've probably turned away maybe like 5 because of that reason.
I see.
I mean, less than 10 for sure. So it does not tend to be a huge issue.
I see. Do all EBOO therapies include light component?
No, not all EBOO is created equal. What in life is created equal? But we're like the Martin Luther King Jr. version of EBOO. Yeah, we include light in our therapy, and it's light from the UVA, UVB, UVC end of the spectrum, which is invisible, and then our unit also includes the full visible light spectrum, so all the way from the reds, oranges, yellow, greens, blues, and purples. And then also actually a little bit of near infrared light, which is also invisible. But it's like this full spectrum. And, I am not a light expert, so I don't even remember what all of the different wavelengths, but it's much more than like red, orange, yellow, green, blue, purple, right? It's actually, I think that wavelength spectrum goes from something like 350, 400 nanometers all the way up to, call it 650-ish. So there's like 300 to 400 nanometers different colors, if you will. It's not 6 or 7 or 8 colors. It's 300, 400 colors. And that's just talking about the visible light. And each wavelength does something different in your body. And it's like all of those are emitted from the sunlight, right? We're humans. We've been developing for a long, long time on this planet exposed to sunlight. That sunlight is so important for our health in so many ways. And so if we can just take some of that and take a little sunlight and put it in a box and add it into this EBOO therapy, there seems to be this synergy. And there's a lot of overlap of what ozone does from a physiologic manner as well as the light does. But ultimately, they work synergistically, they work together, they they seem to actually help minimize negative reactions as well. So people tend to do better, we've noticed, once we flipped on the light switch, because in the beginning we didn't have the light. So it was very interesting. It was only after like a year that we added the light, and it was like, aha. And then we added in hydrogen tablets, and then we added in bioactive carbon, and then we added a pre-nutrient IV to the EBOO.
So when you say you add the light, is it just the tubing that carries the blood inside runs through the light bulb?
Yeah, so there's great questions. So the blood goes through the tubing, and then there's like this glass quartz section that kind of does this twirly motion inside to really rotate all of the red blood cells, so that it's not just the red blood cells going through, because kind of like in the ocean, right? It's only the top of the water that gets the light, and then you go down deep enough and there's like literally it's pitch black, right? So it's the same with red blood cells, a lot more darker than water, right? So you can imagine that without swirling those red blood cells up, the light would only be absorbed by a certain amount of those. So it's a little special tubing that rotates those red blood cells and mixes them up so it gets really nicely lit up, and then goes back into the tubing, and then goes back into the body.
Yeah, so interesting. 10 to 20 times more than the regular one pass, and then still 2 to 3 times more as far as getting enough of the ozone and oxygen mixture into the blood, right? That's how many times more that you're talking about.
Yeah.
And wondering the filter, because some people are watching what's going on with the filter. Sometimes there's like foaming going on. Do you think that means anything? What people see that gets collected at the filter?
Yeah, the $1 million question. It's funny because when we first got into this, like, there's basically nobody in the US. There's only like 2 or 3 other people in the US doing this. And so it's kind of become a thing. And there was a lot put out there that the filter was collecting a bunch of junk or heavy metals or parasites or toxins. And my take, after trying to keep up on all the blogs and everything, and sending in some tests ourselves and listening to what other doctors may have done, including like cut open the filters and actually send those in for testing, is that there definitely is junk that is collected in that. From the filter, there's a little bit of vacuum suction to it. And so people end up with some liquid and or foam. And that's this, like, used to think of it as an oil change, because we're filtering out a bunch of crap, right? And crap being, again, heavy metals, parasites, plastic toxins, whatever it is, right? You name your toxin. And after a few years of this, like, back and forth discussion, is it definitely takes out some of that. But my question, my question is, how clinically useful is that? Because I don't believe that there's that much being taken out. And the blood is just a small portion of our body. And so just call it units. Say I have 100 units of, I don't know, cyanide in me. Like, let's use a nice deadly one, right? Let's say we have 100 units of cyanide in me. Probably only 1 or 2 of those units is going to be in the blood. The rest of that is going to be in the soft tissue. And so if I do a really, like, the perfect EBOO session and pull out those 1 or 2 units of cyanide, well, the moment that's out, 1 or 2 more units of cyanide is going to come out of the tissues and go back into the blood. So have I decreased the amount of cyanide in me? Yes, absolutely. Yes, i.e., yes, my answer is there's junk coming out. Is it clinically relevant? I don't really think so.
Okay. Well, thank you for your honest answer, which is a, underestimation, of what can be done with this treatment that you're so passionate about, right? Because a lot of people wish that you're pulling all kinds of gunk, and this is, that they want to feel that this is a miraculous, a really a tremendous, offer tremendous hope for a
Yeah,
lot of people who think they're very toxic.
exactly. And that's kind of it. That goes back to like, there's EBOO, which is an incredible therapy, but I never want to say someone should go from here straight to EBOO. That's
Mhm.
like never having driven a car and then going straight for the Ferrari. Like, we got to do the basics first. We got to do the lifestyle. We got to do some testing, figure out what you're really toxic in, right? Work on taking that out. And then once you are doing a good, well-rounded job of taking care of your health, then we go on to EBOO. And maybe you're a biohacker or anti-aging longevity person who's doing most of those things. None of us are perfect, right? But if you're doing most of those things, then you can absolutely add on EBOO for kind of that extra enhancement, right? Because we know from studies, from having done 2 rounds of studies, that it lowers inflammation, it lowers blood stickiness, it improves kidney function, it improves like the whole cytokine panel. One of the second round of study that we did in 2023, there's like, we checked like 18 or 20 cytokines, different cytokines, some pro-inflammatory, some anti-inflammatory. And it's like the overall profile definitely got better.
Mm.
And so it's like we have the data now to show that it does what we thought it did and what we hoped
Mhm.
it did.
Okay. So, how popular is the treatment, and how many providers do you think in the US actually offers this?
Gosh, that's a good question. I feel like whereas, even 3 years ago, I think we were the only ones, and then another one popped up in Orange County. I feel like there's probably like 4 or 5 people in LA area that are doing it now.
Hmm.
So I mean, it's definitely gaining popularity. Now that's LA, right? So people are
Mm-hmm.
still flying in from all over the country to come do this with
Hmm.
us. Those first few years, we had a lot of people come in from Florida and Washington, like literally all over the country. Now there's a few places in Florida that do it, so people aren't going to be flying here to do it, right? They're going to find a closer place to do it. So it's definitely gaining popularity. It's going to continue to gain popularity for sure because it is such a powerful treatment.
So, did this treatment start with you? Were you the first one that's actually doing this?
No, I don't want to take credit. I built my own EBOO machine, but it was, so let me back up. This apparently, I didn't have a clue at the time. I was kind of like the naive young doctor or whatever. I had no idea. This has been done in Malaysia for decades.
Oh,
It just has not been done in the United States until 4 years ago.
okay.
It was the first time. And there's like one doctor in Florida who was doing it, one up in the Bay Area, and just those 2, as far as I know. And then I was maybe the third person to do it.
Has there been a
But
lot
I
of
didn't even know
popularity?
about them.
Has it spread to a lot of different countries by now?
I don't know. I'm
Okay.
sure. I mean, it's so popular now that I would be shocked if it's not in Europe. And
Yeah.
I'm sure
And
it's in Europe.
so you mentioned that it's very anti-inflammatory. It reduces stickiness of blood, help with kidney function. What do you think, or the most striking benefits you've seen in your patients as far as helping with people suffering from different conditions? Not that you're making claims that this can treat any of the conditions, but you've seen people with all kinds of conditions, and if they tried this therapy, did you notice anything that's really interesting?
Yeah, I mean, in the studies, we actually tracked their. So so we did the blood work where we measured CRP, fibrinogen, sed rate, uh, chemistry panel, and a CBC for white blood cells, platelets, and then the cytokine panel. So we have that objective data. But then we also tracked their subjective results throughout the course of the study, and mental clarity, energy, what we call drive, just like will drive, sleep quality, digestion, and pain. I believe those were the 6 that we tracked. And interestingly, all of them except for pain. So pain, it was like it was split. Like 30% actually got worse, 30% stayed the same, and then 40% improved. So slightly more improved. That was the only one where it was kind of like a split. But all of those other ones, the mental clarity, the energy, the drive, the sleep quality, and then actually digestion, which surprised me because that was the biggest benefit. All of them either tracked as no improvement, but much more often than no improvement was improvement. And so, just speaking from like as objectively as I can about a subjective complaint, mental clarity, energy, drive, sleep quality, and digestion all improved, right? And for someone who's gone through mold or Lyme, like those, we think of those as being 2 of the bigger issues, more severe issues that affect probably all 5 of those. It's like they tend to feel better after doing EBOO. And so now we just have some data to not prove it, but suggest it, right? Because it's small studies. So 1,000 holes can be poked in our studies, but it's still the first of its kind.
Why do you think EBOO has gained so much popularity? What are people looking from it?
I think I wish it weren't so, but I think people they see a Ferrari and they want the Ferrari. I really think that's it. Right. Now, having said that, once you go do the Ferrari, you're like, it's nice, right? Like it works. So it's absolutely, it works. Like that's what we've seen. Again, we've had people fly repeatedly from other states, and people, that's all like the ultimate testament, right? People are not going to fly back to a little old family practice office in Glendale, California, repeatedly if something's not working. Right.
Yeah. And what are the range of patients you've seen? Do you treat very young patients?
That's a good question. We haven't done. I have always been reluctant to do what I would say is children. So it's pretty much like adults that we do. And it really has more to do with the parents. When treating children, it's more how the parents are. If they're super anxious parents, like it's a big deal to see that much blood outside, even though it's actually not that much blood. It's a big deal. It can really trigger this. It can trigger a vasovagal response, which is like, the people who are scared of seeing their own blood that faint. Like even if it doesn't end up being someone fainting, you can feel kind of crappy, right? And so that's kind of the most common side effect, if you will, is kind of like right at the beginning of the therapy. And it's really because it's because people are just scared. So their sympathetic system kind of goes on overdrive. And so we have stayed away. It's like we have other IVs that we can do in children where it's just one needle going in and maybe some clear colored fluid, right? Rather than like this big old, what looks like a full-on dialysis. So we've just stuck to adults.
Did you see any chronic conditions that responded really well to this treatment?
Yeah, pretty much any autoimmune condition, I would say. And it's interesting that the study suggested, again, it's a small study, but it's interesting that it suggested that pain wasn't affected, because I would say, like, anecdotally speaking, for the people outside of the study, I would say pain, if it's like from rheumatoid arthritis or just chronic osteoarthritis throughout multiple joints or throughout most of the body, like it seems to really help. It helps a lot with mental clarity also. So for those folks with brain fog, that's another huge one. Brain fog from name the condition. There's so many reasons someone could have brain fog, but it helps tremendously with that. It's like this, most people report this sense of clarity afterwards.
What about things like Crohn's or ulcerative colitis also?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's because, ozone, affects what's called the NRF2 pathway, which is it really gets at this antioxidant response elements. So what it does is it's this huge oxidation hit to the body, which too much oxidation is bad. It rusts things, right? So too much oxidation is bad, but a little burst of it kind of forces this counter response, which is ARE, antioxidant response element system, which then enhances our body's ability to make things like glutathione, which is our number one antioxidant. And then that can kind of fight, if you will, or counteract the inflammatory response that is present in Crohn's or ulcerative colitis. So it's like this really neat way. That's what oxidation therapy really does at the end of the day.
Okay, so autoimmune conditions. What about brain diseases, neurodegenerative issues?
Yeah, again, it helps mental clarity. So, and why is why will there never really be a one pill to fix Alzheimer's? Because it's really it's the leaky roof with 50 holes in it, right? There's a whole bunch of different reasons that somebody has dementia or name some other neurocognitive decline, right? So it's always about that's why I say you don't want to just rely on EBOO because you want to be addressing at least the bigger holes or as many of those holes as possible. But in light of that, oxidation therapy, EBOO being what I think of as the creme de la creme of oxidation therapy, it's going to do a huge number against inflammation, which most chronic diseases, most chronic conditions, there's a huge aspect of it that's just over-inflammation or a dysregulated immune system. Those are kind of go hand in hand a lot of times. And oxidation therapy done well fights that or counteracts it, brings balance to the force.
I see. And how often do you recommend people do this treatment?
In the beginning, if someone's really going through it, once a week for 2-3 weeks. And then so basically just 2 or 3 sessions once a week. And then I'd like to see somebody go every 2 weeks or every 3 weeks and then kind of bump it out further and further. I think kind of a good biohacking or anti-aging or longevity regimen is probably once a quarter, once every 6 months, probably once a quarter. So it just depends where someone's at.
Are there people that you would recommend not to do this treatment?
It's a good question. We do put a little bit of heparin in it, which just keeps the blood thin so that it doesn't clot when it goes outside of the body. Super safe. If anything, it actually helps lower inflammation. So we use a super low dose, practically a homeopathic dose. So but having said that, it is a synthetic thing. And so if someone has a heparin allergy, that would be number one. Pregnancy, I probably wouldn't do it on someone pregnant just because too much of liability. However, I will say my first daughter was born in an oxidative environment. We did ozone therapy on my wife when she was pregnant. So I very strongly believe in it. And I kid you not, she's a super athlete. I swear it's partially because of the oxidation therapy that she received in utero. Pretty sure of it. I have no way of knowing that.
So you were giving your wife the EBOO treatments?
Not the EBOO. No, this was before EBOO existed in the US.
I see.
Yeah. But so pregnancy, just from the medical liability, that's really the only reason. And then there's if someone has a G6PD deficiency, which that's a gene that basically it's an oxidation therapy. And so some people can't handle a super strong oxidation. And so we just want to know that. First time someone does an EBOO, we do it like a half session, half dose, and we test the G6PD so that we know if we can go up to the higher dose their second time coming back. So we just do that test. That's another one that you want to be aware of. And then there's reports that if someone has untreated hyperthyroidism, that could be an issue that you want to watch out for. I haven't seen that yet. And that's only if it's untreated, because the oxidation therapy can stimulate metabolism, which if you're hyperthyroid, you're kind of over metabolism. So then we don't want to over metabolism and over metabolize some situation. That makes sense.
Yeah, definitely. So, but you also are doing some studies on the MAH, the major autohematherapy, along. So that's just one past ozone, right? And you said you were incorporating methylene blue.
Yeah, so can I make a little shameless plug for anybody
Of
who wants to
course.
join? You can go to oasisfamilymedicine.com, and like right across the top banner, there's like a little apply here now. It is paid, but it is also subsidized. So it's just like a good deal for most
Mhm.
people. But MAH, or major autohematherapy, is kind of also known as a one pass. And that's what I alluded to earlier. You actually have a bag of salt water, take out some blood, put the blood in the bag, and then put ozone into the bag, mix it up, and you can see the blood turn like bright red. It goes from like more darkish bluish, darkish purple to bright red. And then that drips back down, sometimes through the light therapy, and then goes back into the body. And what I've seen so far is that also improves inflammation on blood work as well. But in this study, it's a 6-session study. So we're actually doing MAH alone for the first session, blood work before and after. And then session number 2 is MAH plus the light therapy. Again, blood work before and after. And then third session, we add in a lower dose of methylene blue. Same thing. Blood work before and after. Fourth session, it's a moderate dose of methylene blue. And then fifth session, it's a higher dose of methylene blue. And then we do a sixth session where we might throw in something else, because ideas for the future. I want to know where to go in the future. So
And these
I just
treatments
want to.
are they 1 week apart, or how far apart?
1 or 2 sessions a week. So it might last 3. So it would last 3 to 6 weeks, depending if you're doing 1 or 2 sessions a
Wow.
week.
I bet,
So
bet these people by the end of the study, they feel pretty great.
yeah. Oh gosh, they're all gonna be very happy they did the study. I can, very likely. And then I just hope to be able to like glean, how much of it is the ozone versus how much is it ozone plus
Mhm.
light, how much of it is ozone plus light plus a little methylene blue, et cetera, et cetera. So
Yeah,
yeah,
what
hopefully
have you seen so far?
we just started that study like from the recording of this like 2 weeks ago. So we're just getting in first round of blood work. So
So you're actually injecting the methylene blue into the blood?
yeah, yes,
Mm.
yeah.
Wow,
So it'll be a little bag, a little separate bag of methylene blue that it will drip
I see.
in as
Yeah,
well. Yeah.
great. Well, thanks for playing at scientist.
Yeah. Fun.
Yeah, I'd
Trying.
love to hear the results. Yeah, that sounds great. Um, so, but do you use other form of oxidative therapies in your office as well, like vitamin C, hydrogen
Yeah.
peroxide?
Yep. Yeah. Hydrogen peroxide, high dose vitamin C. Low dose vitamin C is not a oxidation therapy, but high dose vitamin C is considered oxidation therapy. IV curcumin, currently at least. That
Mm,
is also a form of oxidation therapy. I mean, you go to PubMed and there's like 5,000 studies on the benefit of curcumin, right? And so
mm,
there might be a time and a place to do it intravenously. Obviously, orally every day is probably better in the long run, but we don't always have that convenience, and sometimes we need quicker results.
hmm.
Yeah. Silver IVs, that's another form of oxidation therapy. So all of them have their little place.
Yeah, fantastic. So how can people find you? I mean, I know you're in Glendale from our podcast. What's the best place to find you?
Yeah, just go to oasisfamilymedicine.com, and we have other providers who are phenomenal as well. And again, anybody who's interested in joining a study, just click that little bar across the top there and
Yeah.
check it out.
Yeah, I just have to say, so I did receive one treatment from you, so that was a while ago. It was fantastic. You were very knowledgeable. Your staff are really professional. So just wonderful experience. So yeah, appreciate the great work that you're doing and how many people you've helped.
Yeah, thank you. It's a pleasure, and it's a learning endeavor, and always aiming to improve things.
Yes, yeah, as evidenced by this study that you're putting together. Sounds like you're
Exactly.
just having fun.
Exactly. I am. It's a lot of work, but I'm having fun. Kind of like you. You're doing really awesome work too.
That's
So.
true. Yeah, if you're passionate about it, then it becomes fun, right?
Exactly.
If you don't do it, who's going to do it? So why don't
Amen.
we let's bring the answers.
There you are, sister.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you so much, Dr. Yoshi. You're such a pleasure to interview, and just a lovely person. And thank you for being there for all your patients and bringing the cutting edge technology to people. And yeah, I want to continue to follow your success.
Absolutely. And I could say the same about you. So
Oh,
thank you.
thank you. Thank you, Dr. Yoshi.